Margaret Wellington sat in her corner office on the 47th floor, staring out at the city skyline she had helped shape over the past 30 years. At 65, she had built Wellington Hotels from a single rundown motel into a billion-dollar empire that stretched across 3 continents. But today, her mind wasn't on quarterly reports or expansion plans. It was on her son David and the woman who might destroy everything she had worked for. The elevator chimed, and David burst through her office doors with that familiar grin that had charmed everyone since he was 5 years old. Behind him walked Isabella Shun, a stunning woman with perfectly styled hair and an outfit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Margaret had met Isabella exactly 3 times, and each encounter left her with the same uneasy feeling in her stomach. "Mom, you're going to love this," David said, practically bouncing with excitement. "Isabella and I have been talking, and we want to have our engagement party at the mansion. Can you believe it? We're actually doing this." Margaret forced a smile and stood up to hug her son. Over his shoulder, she watched Isabella examining the expensive artwork on the walls with calculating eyes. When David pulled away, Isabella stepped forward with a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Wellington, I'm so grateful you're letting us use your beautiful home," Isabella said, her voice sweet as honey. "David has told me so much about how hard you've worked to build all this. It must be nice to finally relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor." There was something in the way Isabella said, "finally relax," that made Margaret's skin crawl. It sounded less like a compliment and more like she was already planning Margaret's retirement. "Well, I'm not quite ready for the rocking chair yet," Margaret replied with a polite laugh. "But I'm thrilled you two are happy together." David beamed and launched into details about the party. They wanted 300 guests, a live orchestra, flowers flown in from Holland, and the finest champagne money could buy. As he talked, Margaret noticed Isabella wasn't looking at him with love or adoration. Instead, she was mentally cataloging every expensive item in the room like she was already calculating its worth after they left. Margaret tried to shake off her concerns. Maybe she was being an overprotective mother. Maybe Isabella really did love David for who he was, not what he had. But that feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. 2 days later, Margaret was leaving a board meeting when she heard a familiar voice coming from the ladies' room. Isabella was on the phone, and she clearly thought she was alone. "Trust me, once I marry him, we'll be set for life," Isabella was saying, her voice completely different from the sweet tone she used around David. "His mother won't live forever, and David's too soft to run a real business anyway. Give me 2 years and I'll have access to everything." Margaret's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, listening as Isabella continued. "The prenup? Please, I've already got my lawyer working on that. There are ways around everything if you know what you're doing. And David's so head over heels, he'll sign whatever I put in front of him." Margaret heard footsteps approaching and quickly slipped into a nearby conference room. Her hands were shaking as she processed what she'd just heard. Isabella wasn't just a gold digger, she was a predator with a plan. That evening, Margaret sat in her study, staring at a photo of David graduating from college. He had always been trusting, seeing the best in everyone. It was one of his most beautiful qualities, but it also made him vulnerable to people like Isabella. She picked up her phone and called David. "Honey, I've been thinking about the engagement party. Why don't you let me handle all the arrangements? Consider it my gift to you both." "Mom, that's too much work for you," David protested. "Nonsense, I want to do this. Besides, I'll hire plenty of help. It'll be fun." The next morning, Margaret called her assistant. "Cancel all my meetings for the next 2 weeks. Tell everyone I'm taking a business trip to Europe." "Mrs. Wellington, you don't have any trips scheduled," her assistant said, confused. "I know. I need you to book me a hotel room downtown under a different name. And get me the contact information for the best theatrical makeup artist in the city." What Margaret was planning was risky and maybe a little crazy, but she had to know who Isabella really was. If her son was going to marry this woman, Margaret needed to see her true character when she thought no one important was watching. The Makeup artist, a woman named Patricia who had worked on Broadway for 20 years, met Margaret at the hotel. I need to look like a completely different person, Margaret explained. Someone who works as household help, can you do that? Patricia studied Margaret's face carefully. Honey, with the right makeup, wig, and some padding, your own mother wouldn't recognize you. But why do you want to do this? Margaret explained. The situation in Patricia's eyes lit up with understanding. Oh, I see. You want to see how she treats the help. Smart woman. I've seen enough rich people to know that's the real test of character. For the next 3 hours, Patricia worked her magic. She added wrinkles around Margaret's eyes, changed the shape of her nose with contouring, and fitted her with a gray wig that made her look 10 years older. She added padding to change Margaret's body shape and taught her how to walk differently. When Patricia finished, Margaret looked in the mirror and gasped. Staring back at her was a completely different woman, someone who looked tired, worn down by years of hard work, the kind of person who cleaned other people's houses to make ends meet. Perfect, Margaret whispered. Now I need a job. Margaret had Patricia take photos for a fake ID under the name Mary Johnson. Then she called a domestic staffing agency that provided temporary help for wealthy families. I'm looking for work as household help, she told them, using a slightly different accent. I have experience with cooking, cleaning, and event preparation. The agency was thrilled. With the engagement party just 5 days away, Isabella had been calling frantically, demanding extra staff. They scheduled Margaret for an interview the next morning. As Margaret practiced her new voice and mannerisms in the hotel mirror, she wondered if she was making a mistake. But then she remembered Isabella's cold voice on that phone call, talking about David like he was just a business deal. Mary Johnson stood outside the Wellington mansion at exactly 9 in the morning, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the security guard could hear it. The house looked different from this angle, bigger, more intimidating. She had lived here for 15 years, but now she was seeing it through the eyes of someone who cleaned other people's homes for a living. Isabella answered the door herself, which surprised Mary. The young woman was dressed in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's rent, her hair perfectly styled even though it was still morning. You must be from the agency, Isabella said, looking Mary up and down like she was inspecting a piece of furniture. I specifically asked for someone younger, but I guess you'll have to do. Mary kept her eyes down and nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'm Mary Johnson. I'm here about the housekeeping position. Well, come in then, and wipe your feet properly. I don't want you tracking dirt through my house. My house! The words hit Mary like a slap. Isabella had been engaged to David for exactly 6 months, and she was already claiming ownership of everything. Isabella led her through the foyer, pointing out expensive vases and artwork. Everything in this house is worth more than you'll make in your lifetime, so be careful. If you break anything, it comes out of your pay. They walked into the kitchen, where Isabella handed Mary a list that was 3 pages long. I need all of this done before tomorrow, Isabella said. The engagement party is in 4 days, and this place needs to be perfect. I'm expecting 300 guests, and I won't have them thinking David's family doesn't know how to maintain a proper home. Mary looked at the list. It included cleaning every room in the 12-bedroom mansion, polishing all the silver, washing every piece of china, and arranging flowers in 20 different locations. It was easily a week's worth of work for one person. Ma'am, this is quite a lot for one day, Mary said carefully. Perhaps if there were other people helping. Are you telling me you can't do your job? Isabella's voice turned sharp. Because I can call the agency right now and have them send someone who actually wants to work? Mary quickly shook her head. No, ma'am, I'll get it done. Good, and another thing, I don't want to see you when David's around. He's too soft-hearted and always tries to chat with the help. It's inappropriate and slows down the work. For the next 8 hours, Mary scrubbed, polished, and cleaned like her life depended on it. Every time Isabella walked by, she found something to criticize. The mirrors weren't shiny enough. The floors needed to be mopped again. The bathroom fixtures weren't sparkling. Around noon, David came home for lunch. Mary was cleaning the grand staircase when she heard his voice in the kitchen. Bella, where did all these flowers come from? They're beautiful. Oh, just something I picked up, Isabella replied sweetly. I want everything to be perfect for our party. Mary had spent 2 hours that morning driving to 3 different flower shops to find the exact arrangements Isabella demanded. But now, Isabella was taking credit like she had done the work herself. You're amazing, David said, and Mary could hear the love in his voice. Mary Johnson stood outside the Wellington mansion at exactly 9 in the morning, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the security guard could hear it. The house looked different from this angle, bigger, more intimidating. She had lived here for 15 years, but now she was seeing it through the eyes of someone who cleaned other people's homes for a living. Isabella answered the door herself, which surprised Mary. The young woman was dressed in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's rent, her hair perfectly styled even though it was still morning. You must be from the agency, Isabella said, looking Mary up and down like she was inspecting a piece of furniture. I specifically asked for someone younger, but I guess you'll have to do. Mary kept her eyes down and nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'm Mary Johnson. I'm here about the housekeeping position. Well, come in then, and wipe your feet properly. I don't want you tracking dirt through my house. My house! The words hit Mary like a slap. Isabella had been engaged to David for exactly 6 months, and she was already claiming ownership of everything. Isabella led her through the foyer, pointing out expensive vases and artwork. Everything in this house is worth more than you'll make in your lifetime, so be careful. If you break anything, it comes out of your pay. They walked into the kitchen, where Isabella handed Mary a list that was 3 pages long. I need all of this done before tomorrow, Isabella said. The engagement party is in 4 days, and this place needs to be perfect. I'm expecting 300 guests, and I won't have them thinking David's family doesn't know how to maintain a proper home. Mary looked at the list. It included cleaning every room in the 12-bedroom mansion, polishing all the silver, washing every piece of china, and arranging flowers in 20 different locations. It was easily a week's worth of work for one person. Ma'am, this is quite a lot for one day, Mary said carefully. Perhaps if there were other people helping. Are you telling me you can't do your job? Isabella's voice turned sharp. Because I can call the agency right now and have them send someone who actually wants to work. Mary quickly shook her head. No, ma'am, I'll get it done. Good, and another thing, I don't want to see you when David's around. He's too soft-hearted and always tries to chat with the help. It's inappropriate and slows down the work. For the next 8 hours, Mary scrubbed, polished, and cleaned like her life depended on it. Every time Isabella walked by, she found something to criticize. The mirrors weren't shiny enough. The floors needed to be mopped again. The bathroom fixtures weren't sparkling. Around noon, David came home for lunch. Mary was cleaning the grand staircase when she heard his voice in the kitchen. Bella, where did all these flowers come from? They're beautiful. Oh, just something I picked up, Isabella replied sweetly. I want everything to be perfect for our party. Mary had spent 2 hours that morning driving to 3 different flower shops to find the exact arrangements Isabella demanded. But now Isabella was taking credit like she had done the work herself. You're amazing, David said, and Mary could hear the love in his voice. I'm so lucky to have you. Mary's heart broke a little. Her son had no idea who he was really marrying. When David left, Isabella's sweet voice disappeared instantly. She found Mary in the dining room and started yelling about water spots on the crystal glasses. This is completely unacceptable, Isabella screamed. Are you blind? Look at these spots. How am I supposed to serve my guests with dirty glasses? Mary looked at the glasses. They were spotless. She had cleaned each one by hand and dried them with lint-free cloths. I'm sorry, ma'am, I'll clean them again. You'll clean them until they're perfect. And you'll stay late tonight to make up for this mistake. I'm not paying for substandard work. The afternoon got worse. Isabella followed Mary around the house, finding fault with everything she did. When Mary was dusting the library, Isabella accused her of moving books out of order. When she was vacuuming the living room, Isabella said she was being too loud and disturbing her phone calls. "Can't you do anything quietly?" Isabella snapped. "I'm trying to coordinate with the caterers, and your noise is giving me a headache." Mary switched to a quieter setting on the vacuum, but Isabella still wasn't satisfied. She made Mary get down on her hands and knees to clean the carpet with a brush instead. By 6 o'clock, Mary's back was aching and her hands were raw from cleaning products. She had been working for 9 hours straight with only one bathroom break. Isabella hadn't offered her lunch or even a glass of water. As Mary was cleaning the living room, she accidentally knocked over a small decorative pillow. Isabella appeared out of nowhere, her face twisted with rage. "What did you just do?" she hissed. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "I just bumped the pillow." "I'll fix it right away." "You'll fix it? You think you can just mess up my arrangements and fix it? Do you have any idea how much time I spent making this room perfect?" Mary knew for a fact that Isabella hadn't arranged anything. A professional decorator had done all the work yesterday, and Mary had been there cleaning while they worked. "I'm very sorry," Mary said quietly. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You're going to redo this entire room. Move every piece of furniture, vacuum underneath, dust everything again. And you're not leaving until it's done." Around 7:30, David came home again. Mary heard him calling for Isabella from the front door. "Bella, I'm home. How's the party planning going?" Isabella's entire personality changed in an instant. Her angry scowl melted into a bright smile, and her voice became soft and loving. "Hi, sweetheart. Everything's going wonderfully. I've been working so hard to make sure our party is perfect." Mary watched from the living room as Isabella ran to greet David with a passionate kiss. She was like a completely different person, warm, affectionate, and glowing with happiness. "You look tired, baby," David said, touching Isabella's face gently. "Have you been overdoing it?" "Maybe a little," Isabella admitted with a sweet laugh. "But I want our engagement party to be magical. This house means so much to your family, and I want to honor that." Mary felt sick listening to Isabella's performance. The woman was a skilled actress, and David was completely fooled. "Why don't you relax while I grab a shower?" David suggested. "We can order dinner and watch a movie." "That sounds perfect," Isabella cooed. "I'll just check on a few last-minute details." The moment David disappeared upstairs, Isabella's mask slipped back off. She marched into the living room where Mary was still working and grabbed her arm roughly. "I told you not to be here when David's home," she whispered harshly. "Are you stupid? Get to the back of the house and stay there until he leaves for his business dinner." Mary's arm throbbed where Isabella had grabbed it, but she nodded and gathered her cleaning supplies. As she walked toward the back of the house, she heard Isabella on the phone in the kitchen. "No, the stupid maid is taking forever," Isabella was saying. "I specifically told the agency I needed someone competent, and they send me this old woman who can barely move. I might have to fire her and get someone else." It was nearly midnight when Mary finally finished. Isabella had checked her work 3 times, finding imaginary problems each time. She made Mary re-clean the windows because she claimed there were streaks that didn't exist. She had Mary reorganize the china cabinet because the plates weren't perfectly aligned. "I suppose this will have to do," Isabella said with a sigh, looking around the spotless living room. "Be here at 7 tomorrow morning, and wear something more presentable. You look like you crawled out of a dumpster." Mary drove back to her hotel room in tears. In all her years of building her business, she had never treated an employee the way Isabella had treated her today. She had always believed in treating people with dignity and respect, regardless of their position. Watching Isabella's cruelty made her stomach turn, but she also felt a growing determination. Every harsh word, every unreasonable demand, every moment of abuse was revealing Isabella's true character. David needed to see this side of his fiancée before it was too late. As Mary soaked her aching feet in the hotel bathtub, she wondered how much worse Isabella's behavior would get over the next few days. Part of her wanted to give up the charade and confront Isabella directly, but she knew that wouldn't work. Isabella would just deny everything and paint Mary as a jealous mother trying to sabotage her son's happiness. No, Mary had to see this through. She had to gather enough evidence to show David who Isabella really was, even if it meant enduring more abuse, more exhaustion, and more heartbreak watching her son being deceived. Tomorrow would be another long day, but Mary was ready for whatever Isabella threw at her. The third day started like the others, with Mary arriving at 7 in the morning to find Isabella already dressed and ready with another impossible list of tasks. But something felt different today. Isabella seemed more on edge, more aggressive. She had been on her phone all morning, arguing with someone about wedding venues and flower arrangements. "The caterers are completely useless," Isabella complained to Mary while she dusted the main hallway. "They're trying to charge me double what we agreed on. Everyone thinks they can take advantage of me just because I'm marrying into money." Mary kept quiet and continued working. She had learned that any response from her only made Isabella angrier. Around 10 o'clock, Mary was carefully dusting the antique vases in the main living room. These weren't just decorations, they were priceless. Artifacts that Margaret had collected over decades of travel. Each one had a story, a memory attached to it. There was the blue porcelain vase from her first business trip to China, the crystal piece from a successful deal in Prague, and the delicate white ceramic vase that David had given her for her 60th birthday. Mary was holding David's gift, remembering the day he'd presented it to her with such pride, when Isabella burst into the room talking loudly on her phone. "I don't care what the contract says," Isabella was shouting. "I want white roses, not pink ones. Do you understand me? White roses, or I'll find another florist." The sudden noise startled Mary. Her hands, already tired from 3 days of non-stop cleaning, fumbled with the vase. She watched in slow motion as it slipped from her grasp and crashed to the marble floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. The sound seemed to echo through the entire house. Isabella ended her phone call immediately and stared at the broken pieces scattered across the floor. For a moment, there was complete silence. Mary knelt down, trying desperately to gather the pieces, hoping somehow they could be put back together. "I'm so sorry," Mary whispered, her voice shaking. "I'll pay for it. I'll replace it somehow." Isabella's face went completely white, then bright red with rage. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she said, her voice eerily calm. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "It was an accident. An accident." Isabella's voice rose to a shriek. That vase was worth more than you'll make in 10 years. It was one of a kind, irreplaceable." Mary looked down at the broken pieces of her son's gift and felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, I'll do anything to make this right." "You'll make it right?" Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How exactly do you plan to do that?" Before Mary could answer, Isabella stepped closer, her face twisted with fury. "You stupid, clumsy woman! Do you think sorry fixes anything?" Then it happened. Isabella's hand flew across Mary's face with a sharp crack that seemed to echo off the walls. The slap was so sudden and forceful that Mary stumbled backward, her cheek burning with pain. Mary stood there in shock, her hand pressed to her stinging cheek. In all her 65 years, no one had ever struck her. She felt humiliated, angry, and heartbroken all at once. "That vase is coming out of your pay," Isabella continued, as if hitting someone was the most natural thing in the world. "All of it. You'll work for free until it's paid off." Mary knew the real maid salary Isabella was planning to pay wouldn't cover even a fraction of the vase's value. Isabella was essentially saying Mary would never be paid at all. "And since you clearly can't be trusted with delicate work," Isabella continued, "you'll be doing the floors. All of them, on your hands and knees. Maybe some hard labor will teach you to be more careful." For the next 4 hours, Mary crawled across every floor in the mansion with a scrub brush and bucket. Her knees ached on the hard marble and wood surfaces. Her back screamed in pain from the unnatural position. But every time she tried to stand up to stretch, Isabella appeared to yell at her. "I didn't tell you to take a break?" Isabella would snap. "Keep scrubbing. Those floors better be spotless." Around 2 o'clock, Isabella set up her phone and ring light in the living room, right where Mary was working. She had changed into a designer outfit and spent an hour doing her makeup. "Hi everyone," Isabella said brightly to her phone camera. "Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm getting a spa treatment at home while I prepare for my engagement party. I'm so excited to share this journey with you all." Mary watched in disbelief as Isabella started live streaming herself getting a manicure and facial, acting like she was living her best life. Meanwhile, Mary was literally on her hands and knees just a few feet away, scrubbing floors with a brush. "Some of you have been asking about wedding planning stress," Isabella continued to her camera. "The key is to delegate and take care of yourself. I always make sure to schedule in self-care time, even during busy periods." Isabella spent the next hour filming herself relaxing while Mary worked around her. Occasionally, Isabella would gesture vaguely in Mary's direction while talking about the importance of maintaining a beautiful home environment. It was degrading and humiliating. Mary felt like a prop in Isabella's social media performance. Completely invisible as a human being, around 4 o'clock, David came home early from work. Mary heard his car in the driveway and quickly tried to stand up, but Isabella shot her a warning look. "Stay where you are," Isabella hissed quietly. "Keep working." David walked into the living room just as Isabella was ending her live stream. His face lit up when he saw her, but then he noticed Mary on the floor. "Hi, sweetheart," Isabella said, immediately switching to her sweet voice. She gave David a passionate kiss, positioning herself so he couldn't see Mary's face clearly. "What happened to your cheek?" David asked Mary with concern. Noticing the red mark that was still visible, before Mary could answer, Isabella jumped in smoothly. "Oh, poor Mary had a little accident earlier. She bumped into a door frame. I told her to be more careful, but she insisted on continuing to work. She's such a dedicated employee." Mary stared at Isabella in amazement. The woman was a master manipulator, turning her own violence into a story of Mary's clumsiness and Isabella's compassion. "Maybe she should take a break," David suggested kindly. "She looks exhausted." "I offered," Isabella said with fake concern. "But she really wanted to finish the floors today. She takes such pride in her work." David smiled at Mary. "That's wonderful. We really appreciate your hard work. The house looks amazing." Mary managed a weak smile and nodded. If only he knew what his beloved fiancée had really been doing to her. After David went upstairs to change clothes, Isabella's mask dropped immediately. She knelt down next to Mary, speaking in a low, threatening voice. "If you ever tell David what really happened today, I'll make sure you never work again," she whispered. "I have connections everywhere. One word from me, and you'll be blacklisted from every agency in the city." Mary nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her cheeks still throbbed from the slap, her knees were raw from scrubbing floors, and her spirit was nearly broken, but even through her pain and exhaustion, Mary felt a burning determination growing inside her. Isabella had just shown her true colors in the worst possible way. This wasn't just about being mean to the help anymore. Isabella was physically abusive, manipulative, and completely without conscience. David needed to see this. Whatever it took, however much more abuse Mary had to endure, she would make sure her son learned the truth about the woman he planned to marry. As Mary finally stood up and gathered her cleaning supplies, her legs shaking from exhaustion, she knew tomorrow would bring even worse treatment. But she also knew she was getting closer to exposing Isabella for who she really was. The engagement party was tomorrow night. Mary just had to survive one more day. And the morning of the engagement party arrived like a storm. Mary showed up at 5 in the morning to find Isabella already awake, pacing around the kitchen in her silk pajamas with her phone pressed to her ear. She was screaming at someone about ice sculptures and champagne deliveries. "I don't care if it's Saturday morning," Isabella yelled into the phone. "You promised delivery by 6 a.m. and it's already 5:30. If those ice sculptures aren't here in the next hour, you'll never work another event in this city." Mary tried to slip quietly into the kitchen to start her work, but Isabella spotted her immediately. "There you are," Isabella snapped, ending her call. "I hope you're ready for the hardest day of your pathetic life, because I need this place perfect in 12 hours. She thrust a new list at Mary, this one even longer than the previous days. Mary's heart sank as she read it. Isabella wanted every room deep cleaned again, fresh flowers arranged in 30 different locations, old silver polished to a mirror shine, and the entire outdoor terrace scrubbed and decorated. "And I want you to understand something, Isabella," continued, stepping uncomfortably close to Mary. "If anything goes wrong today, if even one tiny detail isn't perfect, you're done. Not just fired, I'll make sure you never work anywhere again." For the next 6 hours, Mary worked like a machine. Her body was already exhausted from 3 days of abuse, but she pushed through the pain. She cleaned windows until they sparkled like diamonds. She arranged flowers until her fingers were scratched and bleeding from thorns. She polished silver until she could see her reflection in every piece, but nothing was good enough for Isabella. Every hour she would find something new to criticize. "These flowers are wilting," Isabella would say about arrangements that were perfectly fresh. "Start over." "This silver still has spots," she would claim about pieces that gleamed like mirrors. "Do it again." By noon, vendors were arriving to set up for the party. The caterers brought in tables and chairs, the florist delivered massive arrangements, and the band started setting up their equipment on the terrace. The house was buzzing with activity, but Isabella's mood only got worse. Mary was in the main hallway, carefully arranging white roses in a crystal vase, when Isabella came storming over with a glass of red wine in her hand. She had been drinking since 10 in the morning, claiming it was for her nerves. "These flowers are completely wrong," Isabella said, even though the arrangement was exactly what she had requested. "The roses are too big, the colors don't match, everything about this is wrong." "I can fix it," Mary said quietly, starting to adjust the flowers. "Fix it? You think you can fix this disaster?" Isabella's voice was getting louder, and several vendors stopped working to watch. Then, without warning, Isabella accidentally knocked over her wineglass. The deep red wine splashed across the white carpet, creating a spreading stain that looked like blood. "Look what you made me do," Isabella screamed, though Mary had been standing 3 feet away. "You bumped into me and made me spill wine all over my carpet." Mary stared at the stain in horror. She knew Isabella had spilled it on purpose, but she also knew there was no point in arguing. "Clean it up," Isabella demanded, "right now. Get on your hands and knees and clean up this mess you caused." Mary knelt down and started working on the stain with carpet cleaner and towels. The wine had already soaked deep into the expensive white fibers. Isabella stood over her, criticizing every movement. "You're making it worse," Isabella said, though Mary was clearly improving the stain. "Press harder, use more cleaner." "Why are you so useless?" The caterers and florists were watching now, clearly uncomfortable with Isabella's behavior. Mary felt humiliated being yelled at in front of all these people, but she kept working. "This is taking too long," Isabella suddenly announced. She reached down and grabbed Mary's arm, yanking her to her feet with surprising force. "Get up. People are arriving soon, and I can't have you crawling around on the floor when my guests are here." Mary gasped in pain as Isabella's fingernails dug into her arm. She could feel bruises forming immediately where Isabella gripped her. "You'll have to serve drinks tonight," Isabella continued, still holding Mary's arm tightly. "And you better smile and act professional even though you're completely incompetent." She finally let go, leaving 4 dark fingerprint marks on Mary's arm. Mary rubbed the sore spots, trying not to let tears show in her eyes. The first guests started arriving at 6 o'clock. Mary had been given a black uniform dress that was too small and uncomfortable, but Isabella insisted she wear it anyway. She was stationed at the bar, serving champagne and cocktails to the 300 guests who filled the mansion and terrace. Every time someone asked for a drink, Mary had to reach up or move in ways that made her bruised arm visible. She saw several guests notice the marks and whisper to each other, but no one said anything directly. Isabella spent the evening floating through the party like a princess, accepting congratulations and showing off her enormous engagement ring. She was the perfect hostess, charming, graceful, and radiant with happiness. No one would have guessed that just hours earlier she had been physically attacking her employee around 8 o'clock. Mary noticed an elderly woman struggling near the terrace doors. The woman was trying to maneuver her wheelchair up a small step, but she couldn't manage it alone. Mary recognized her immediately. It was David's grandmother, Rose, who had always been kind to Mary when she visited the house. Mary started to move toward Rose to help her, but Isabella appeared out of nowhere and grabbed her arm again, right on the bruises. "Where do you think you're going?" Isabella hissed quietly. "You're supposed to be working the bar?" "That elderly lady needs help," Mary whispered back. "She can't get her wheelchair up the step." Isabella glanced over at Rose, who was still struggling alone. "That's not your problem. Get back to work." Mary couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But she's David's grandmother." I don't care if she's the Queen of England," Isabella cut her off. "You work for me, not her. Get back to the bar and do your job." Mary watched in horror as Isabella walked right past Rose, completely ignoring the elderly woman's struggle. Rose was clearly exhausted from trying to get her wheelchair over the step, but Isabella acted like she didn't even see her. Other guests were starting to notice Rose's predicament too, but they seemed to be waiting for someone in the family to help her. When they saw Isabella walk by without stopping, they looked confused and uncomfortable. Finally, a kind guest helped Rose with her wheelchair, but the damage was done. Mary had watched Isabella show complete disrespect for David's beloved grandmother, the woman who had helped raise him after his father died. That was the moment Mary knew she couldn't wait any longer. Isabella wasn't just cruel to employees, she was heartless toward David's own family. If she could treat his grandmother with such callousness, what would she do to David himself once she had access to his money? Mary looked around the party, at all the guests celebrating what they thought was a happy occasion. David was giving a speech about love and commitment, completely unaware that his fiancée was a monster. Isabella stood beside him, smiling and nodding, playing the role of the perfect bride-to-be, but Mary knew the truth. She had seen Isabella's real face, felt her violence, witnessed her cruelty. And now, watching her treat Rose with such disrespect, Mary felt something snap inside her. Enough was enough. Mary walked quietly to the sound system controls, her heart pounding with determination. It was time for Isabella's mask to come off in front of everyone. It was time for David to see who he was really planning to marry. As David continued his speech about how lucky he was to find such a wonderful woman, Mary prepared to show the entire party exactly what kind of woman Isabella really was. The moment of truth had finally arrived. Mary's hands trembled as she approached the sound system. The music was playing softly in the background while David continued his heartfelt speech about finding true love. 300 guests stood around the terrace and main rooms, champagne glasses in hand, smiling and celebrating what they believed was a beautiful love story. If only they knew the truth. Mary took a deep breath and thought about everything she had endured over the past 4 days. The verbal abuse, the impossible demands, the slap across her face, being forced to scrub floors on her hands and knees, and finally watching Isabella ignore David's struggling grandmother. Each memory fueled her determination. She had built a billion-dollar company by being decisive in crucial moments. This was one of those moments. Mary quietly signaled to the DJ, a young man she recognized from previous family events. He looked confused but stepped aside when she gestured toward the microphone controls. The music faded as David was finishing his speech. "And that's why I know Isabella and I will have a lifetime of happiness together," David was saying, his arm around his fiancée. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us." The crowd began to applaud, but Mary's voice cut through the noise as she spoke into the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt." All eyes turned toward the small woman in the ill-fitting maid's uniform standing by the sound system. David looked confused, Isabella looked furious, and the guests seemed unsure what was happening. Mary reached up and slowly removed the gray wig she had been wearing for 4 days. Her real hair, styled in its usual elegant silver bob, fell into place. Next, she pulled out the makeup wipes Patricia had given her. and began removing the theatrical makeup that had aged her appearance. Gasps rippled through the crowd as guests began to recognize the familiar features emerging. David's face went completely white. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice barely audible even with the microphone nearby. "Hello, David," Mary said, her real voice now clear and strong. "Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Margaret Wellington, David's mother and the owner of this house." The silence was deafening. 300 people stood frozen, trying to process what they were seeing. Isabella's face had gone from furious to terrified in seconds. "For the past 4 days," Margaret continued, "I've been working in this house as a maid named Mary Johnson. I wanted to see how my son's fiancée treated people when she thought no one important was watching." She paused, looking directly at Isabella, who was backing away from David like a cornered animal. "Isabella, would you like to tell everyone how you've been treating me?" I don't know what you're talking about," Isabella stammered, but her voice was shaking. "I treated the help with respect." "Ask anyone," Margaret smiled sadly. "Should I tell them about yesterday, when you slapped me across the face for accidentally breaking a vase?" The crowd gasped. Several people pulled out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. "That's a lie," Isabella shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "She's making it up because she doesn't want David to be happy." "Should I tell them how you made me scrub every floor in this house on my hands and knees as punishment?" Margaret continued calmly. "Or how you grabbed my arm so hard today that you left bruises?" Margaret rolled up her sleeve, revealing the dark fingerprint marks Isabella had left. The guests murmured in shock and disgust. David stared at the bruises on his mother's arm, his face a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Isabella, please tell me this isn't true." "It's not what it looks like," Isabella said desperately. "She's twisting everything. I was stressed about the party, maybe I was a little demanding, but should I tell them about tonight?" Margaret interrupted. "When you walked right past your grandmother Rose while she struggled with her wheelchair? When you told me it wasn't my problem to help her?" David's grandmother Rose, who was sitting nearby in her wheelchair, nodded slowly. "She did walk right past me, David. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to say anything." The crowd was now openly staring at Isabella with disgust and disapproval. She looked around frantically, realizing she was losing control of the situation. "And should I tell them about the phone call I overheard on your second day here?" Margaret asked. "The one where you said that once you married David, you'd be set for life? Where you talked about getting around the prenup and gaining access to everything?" Isabella's face went bright red. "You were spying on me. This is all illegal." "You can't." "Actually," Margaret said, pulling out her phone, "I can. Because this entire house has security cameras that I had installed before the party. Everything you did to me over the past 4 days has been recorded." Isabella's eyes went wide with panic. She looked around at the 300 guests who were all staring at her with horror and contempt. The mask she had worn so carefully for 6 months had completely fallen away. "You know what?" Isabella suddenly screamed, her voice becoming shrill and ugly. "I'm glad it's all out in the open. Yes, I was marrying him for his money. Did you really think I could love someone so weak and pathetic?" The crowd gasped. David looked like he had been physically struck. "You're all nothing without your precious money." Isabella continued, completely losing control. "David is a spoiled mama's boy who can't make a decision without running to mommy. I was doing him a favor by marrying him." "Isabella, stop," David said quietly, but she was beyond listening. "And you," she pointed at Margaret, "you think you're so smart with your little disguise? Your son is going to end up alone because no real woman will ever be good enough for his controlling mother." Margaret remained calm while Isabella ranted. She had expected this meltdown. When people like Isabella were cornered, they showed their true selves completely. "Are you finished?" Margaret asked politely. Isabella glared at her, breathing heavily. "I'm taking whatever I can carry from this house, and you can't stop me." "Actually, I can," Margaret said. "Security is already waiting by the exits. And considering you just admitted to attempted fraud in front of 300 witnesses, Think the police might want to have a conversation with you." Isabella's face went white as she realized what she had just done. She had confessed to everything in front of a room full of people, many of whom were recording on their phones. "David," Isabella said, suddenly switching back to her sweet voice. "You know, I didn't mean any of that. I'm just upset and confused. We can work this out." But David was looking at her like he had never seen her before. "Is any of what my mother said true? Did you really hit her?" Isabella opened her mouth to lie again, but David's grandmother, Rose, spoke up. "I saw the red mark on her cheek yesterday, David, and those bruises on her arm are fresh." David turned to look at his mother, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "I know you didn't, sweetheart," Margaret said gently. "That's why I had to show you." Isabella realized she had lost completely. In a final act of spite, she grabbed an expensive crystal figurine from a nearby table and threw it against the wall, where it shattered into pieces. "If I can't have any of this, then I'll destroy what I can," she screamed. Two security guards appeared immediately and gently but firmly escorted Isabella toward the exit. As they led her away, she continued screaming threats and insults at everyone in sight. The party guests stood in stunned silence for a moment. Then, slowly, they began to applaud. Not for the engagement that had just been dramatically ended, but for Margaret's courage in protecting her son. David walked over to his mother and hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all that. Can you ever forgive me for being so blind?" "There's nothing to forgive," Margaret said, holding her son close. "I just wanted you to be safe and happy." As the guests gradually began to leave, sharing the incredible story they had just witnessed, David helped his grandmother with her wheelchair and made sure she was comfortable. "Thank you for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life," he told his mother. Margaret smiled, finally able to take off the uncomfortable maid's uniform and be herself again. That's what mothers are for. The engagement party was over, but the real celebration, the revelation of truth and the protection of family, had just begun.